Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Imagine a city that grew into an empire, a civilization that shaped the very foundations of the Western world. From a humble settlement on the banks of the Tiber to a sprawling dominion that stretched from the misty shores of Britain to the sun-scorched sands of Mesopotamia. This is the story of Rome, a tale of legendary founders, brilliant generals, visionary emperors, and catastrophic collapses. It's a story of unparalleled ambition, breathtaking innovation, and brutal power that echoed through millennia. Join us as we journey through more than 1,000 years of history to witness the epic rise and the dramatic fall of the Roman Empire. In the heart of ancient Alba Longa, a prophecy cast a long shadow over the throne of King Numitor. His envious brother Amulius usurped the crown, murdering Numitor's sons and forcing his daughter, Rhea Silvia, into celibacy as a Vestal virgin to extinguish the royal bloodline. But fate, or perhaps the gods themselves, had other plans. Rhea Silvia claimed to have been visited by Mars, the god of war, and from this divine union, twin sons were born, Romulus and Remus. Fearful of the prophecy that Numitor's descendants would reclaim the throne, the tyrannical Amulius ordered the infants to be cast into the Tiber River. The servant tasked with this grim duty, however, took pity on them, placing them in a basket and setting it afloat on the swollen waters. The river, as if guided by a divine hand, carried the basket to the shore at the base of what would later be known as the Palatine Hill. There, a most unusual guardian found them. A she-wolf, having lost her own cubs, discovered the crying infants, and against all nature, suckled them, providing the nourishment they needed to survive. They were later discovered by a shepherd named Faustulus, who, along with his wife, Acca Larentia, raised the boys as their own. Unaware of their noble lineage, Romulus and Remus grew into strong and charismatic young men, natural leaders among the local shepherds. They led raids against bandits and protected their community, their inherent nobility shining through their humble upbringing. Eventually, their true identity was revealed when Remus was captured in a dispute and brought before the deposed King Numitor. Recognizing his grandson, Numitor, with the help of the now powerful twins, orchestrated an uprising. They stormed the palace, killed the usurper Amulius, and restored their grandfather to the throne of Alba Longa. With their legacy restored, the brothers decided not to wait to inherit a kingdom, but to found a city of their own near the place where they had been saved. This decision, born of ambition and destiny, would set them on a tragic collision course, a conflict that would ultimately baptize their new city in a brother's blood and give birth to the legend of Rome. Following the fratricidal founding of Rome, Romulus became its first king, a martial ruler who established the city's initial military and political institutions, including the Senate. His reign was marked by the legendary rape of the Sabine women, a desperate act to populate his city of men, which led to war and eventual union with the Sabines. After Romulus's mysterious disappearance in a storm, he was deified as the god Quirinus, leaving a vacuum of power. The throne then passed to the Sabine Numa Pompilius, a stark contrast to his predecessor. Numa was a man of peace and piety, credited with establishing Rome's most important religious institutions, the calendar, and the major priesthoods. His long, peaceful reign was a crucial period of cultural and legal development, grounding the warlike city in tradition and faith. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, returned Rome to its aggressive roots. A warrior king, he neglected religion in favor of military expansion, most notably conquering and destroying Rome's mother city, Alba Longa, and relocating its population to Rome. He was followed by Ancus Marcius, Numa's grandson, who balanced the warlike nature of Tullus with the piety of his grandfather, expanding Roman territory to the sea by founding the port of Ostia. The final three kings belonged to the Etruscan Tarquin dynasty. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, the fifth king, was a great builder, responsible for constructing the Circus Maximus, the Cloaca Maxima, and beginning the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. His successor, Servius Tullius, was a man of humble origins who rose to power and enacted significant social reforms, including the first census, which organized citizens into classes based on wealth for military and tax purposes. The era of monarchy, however, ended in tyranny. The seventh and final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, seized power through assassination and ruled as a despot. His reign was characterized by bloodshed, arrogance, and a complete disregard for Roman law and the Senate, sowing the seeds of a revolution that would forever change the destiny of Rome. The reign of Tarquinius Superbus had stretched the patience of the Roman people to its breaking point. His tyranny was not merely political, it was personal, culminating in an act of violation that would ignite the flames of revolution. The catalyst was his son, Sextus Tarquinius, who became obsessed with Lucretia, the virtuous wife of the nobleman Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. While the men were away at war, Sextus visited Lucretia's home, where he was welcomed as a kinsman. In the dead of night, he entered her chambers and, threatening her with both death and posthumous dishonor, brutally assaulted her. The next day, a devastated Lucretia summoned her father, her husband, and their most trusted friends, including the seemingly slow-witted Lucius Junius Brutus, a nephew of the king who had feigned foolishness to survive Tarquin's purges. Before these men, Lucretia recounted the horrific ordeal, and asserting her innocence while refusing to live with the shame, she drew a hidden dagger and took her own life. Her sacrifice was the spark. Brutus, casting off his facade of idiocy, pulled the dagger from her wound and swore a sacred oath to avenge her and drive the Tarquins from Rome forever. He rallied the grieving men and the Roman populace, carrying Lucretia's body to the Forum. His impassioned speech decried not only the assault on Lucretia, but the years of oppression, arrogance, and violence the people had suffered under Tarquin the Proud. The citizens of Rome, moved by the tragedy and Brutus's call to action, rose up in open rebellion. They closed the city gates, barring the king's return from his military campaign, and the Senate formally decreed the deposition and banishment of Tarquin and his entire family. In 509 BC, the monarchy was abolished. In its place, a new form of government was established, the res publica, the public affair. Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's husband, Collatinus, were elected as the first two consuls, leaders who would hold power not for life, but for a single year, forever accountable to the Senate and the people they served. The blood of a noblewoman had washed away a throne and given birth to a republic. With the Italian peninsula consolidated, Rome's ambition cast its gaze across the Mediterranean, where it met the eye of an equally formidable power, the maritime empire of Carthage. The inevitable clash for dominance ignited the First Punic War, a brutal 23-year struggle fought primarily at sea. Rome, a land-based power, was forced to become a naval one, reverse engineering a captured Carthaginian warship to build its own fleet. Through grim determination and tactical innovations, like the Corvus, a boarding bridge, Rome eventually triumphed, seizing control of Sicily and Sardinia. But this defeat only sowed the seeds for a far greater conflict. From Carthage rose Hannibal Barca, a military genius who swore a blood oath as a boy to be an eternal enemy of Rome. In 218 BC, he launched the Second Punic War with one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history, marching his army, complete with war elephants, from Iberia, over the Pyrenees, and across the treacherous Alps into Italy. He descended upon the Romans like an avenging storm, inflicting a series of catastrophic defeats at the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and most famously at Cannae, where his brilliant tactics of encirclement annihilated a Roman army nearly twice the size of his own. For over a decade, Hannibal terrorized Italy, yet Rome refused to break. It adopted the Fabian strategy of attrition, avoiding direct engagement, while rebuilding its strength. The turning point came with the rise of a Roman general equal to Hannibal's genius, Publius Cornelius Scipio. Instead of fighting Hannibal in Italy, Scipio took the war to Carthaginian territory in Iberia, and then directly to Africa, forcing Hannibal's recall to defend his homeland. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio finally defeated Hannibal, ending the war and earning the name Africanus. Decades later, a resurgent Carthage still unnerved Roman hardliners like Cato the Elder, who famously ended every speech with "Carthago delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed. The Third Punic War was less a war than an execution. Rome laid siege to the city, and after 3 years, utterly obliterated it, solidifying its uncontested mastery over the Mediterranean. The year is 218 BCE. Rome, confident after its victory in the First Punic War, believed Carthage was a spent force. They had underestimated the burning hatred of one man, Hannibal Barca. As a child, he had sworn an oath upon an altar to be a lifelong enemy of Rome, and he was about to unleash a strategic masterwork of vengeance. His plan was audacious to the point of insanity: to march an army, complete with cavalry and war elephants, from Iberia, across the Pyrenees, and over the treacherous, snow-covered Alps into Italy itself. The journey was a brutal trial, costing him nearly half his men, but the force that descended into the Po Valley was a hardened, loyal instrument of war. The Romans, expecting a fight in Sicily or Africa, were caught completely off guard. Hannibal's tactical genius was immediately apparent. At the Battle of the Trebia, he used the cold and the terrain to his advantage, luring the Romans into a devastating trap. Then, at Lake Trasimene, he orchestrated one of the largest and most successful ambushes in military history, annihilating a consular army in the morning mist. Panic gripped the capital. The unthinkable was happening. A foreign enemy was rampaging through the Italian heartland. The climax came at Cannae in 216 BCE, a battle that remains a case study in tactical perfection. Facing a Roman army nearly double his size, Hannibal executed a brilliant double envelopment, his crescent-shaped formation buckling in the center to draw the Romans in before his elite cavalry smashed into their rear. The result was a massacre of unprecedented scale, with tens of thousands of Romans killed. The phrase "Hannibal ad portas," Hannibal at the gates, became a terrifying reality, a saying used for generations to frighten children. Yet Hannibal never marched on Rome itself. Lacking siege equipment and a secure supply line, he opted to try and dismantle Rome's confederation of allies. In this, he ultimately failed. Rome's response, led by Quintus Fabius Maximus, was to avoid direct confrontation, shadowing Hannibal's army and slowly grinding down his resources. Rome's true strength was not just in its legions, but in its unyielding resolve. It absorbed catastrophic losses that would have shattered any other power, raised new armies, and refused to even consider the notion of surrender. Hannibal had won every battle, but Rome would win the war. By the end of the 2nd century BCE, the Roman Republic faced an existential crisis. Its traditional military machine, the citizen militia, was breaking down. This system required soldiers to be land-owning citizens who supplied their own equipment. But decades of constant warfare had created a large class of landless poor, the proletarii, who were ineligible to serve. At the same time, massive Germanic tribes, the Cimbri and Teutones, were migrating south, inflicting a series of humiliating and catastrophic defeats upon Roman armies. The state was desperate. Into this crisis stepped Gaius Marius, a novus homo, a new man from a non-aristocratic background, who had risen through sheer military talent. Elected consul in 107 BCE, he initiated a series of sweeping changes that would forever alter the Roman army and, ultimately, the Republic itself. His most radical reform was to abolish the property requirement for military service. For the first time, he recruited from the landless urban poor, promising them pay, spoils of war, and a plot of land upon retirement. This transformed the army from a temporary civic duty into a professional career. The state now supplied standardized equipment, including the pilum and gladius. Marius also reorganized the legion, making the cohort of roughly 480 men its primary tactical unit, which offered greater flexibility on the battlefield. He instilled a new sense of identity in these legions, giving each its own silver eagle standard, the aquila, which became an object of intense veneration. Soldiers became known as Marius mules for the immense amount of gear they were trained to carry, which drastically reduced the army's reliance on slow-moving baggage trains. The results were spectacular. Marius's new professional army decisively crushed the Germanic threat and saved Rome. However, the long-term consequences were profound and dangerous. These new soldiers were loyal not to the abstract idea of the Senate and people of Rome, but to the general who led them, paid them, and guaranteed their retirement. This seismic shift in loyalty from state to general created powerful private armies and set the stage for the bloody civil wars that would ultimately destroy the Roman Republic. In 73 BCE, from the brutal gladiator school of Lentulus Batiatus in Capua, a legend was born from desperation. Spartacus, a Thracian auxiliary forced into gladiatorial combat, led a breakout of around 70 of his fellow fighters. Armed initially with nothing more than kitchen implements, they fought their way to freedom and seized a cache of proper weapons. This small act of defiance would ignite the most famous slave revolt in history, the Third Servile War. From the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, their numbers swelled rapidly. They were joined by runaway slaves, dispossessed farmers, and desperate shepherds from across the Italian countryside, their ranks eventually growing to an estimated 70,000 to 120,000 people. This was not merely a band of rebels, it was a functioning army, a mobile nation of the dispossessed. Rome, arrogant and dismissive, initially sent only small Praetorian cohorts to deal with what they considered a minor nuisance. Spartacus and his commanders, including Crixus and Oenomaus, outmaneuvered and annihilated these forces, their victories inspiring more to join their cause. As the slave army marched through Italy, defeating 2 consular legions in succession, panic began to set in within the capital. The social order of the Republic, built on the foundation of slave labor, was being shaken to its core. However, the rebellion was plagued by internal divisions. While Spartacus reportedly wished to lead his people north, over the Alps to freedom in Gaul, other factions preferred to remain in Italy to plunder its riches. This internal strife proved fatal. The Senate, now fully alarmed, turned to the immensely wealthy and ambitious Marcus Licinius Crassus. He raised a new army of 8 legions at his own expense and pursued Spartacus with ruthless determination. After trapping the rebel army in the toe of Italy, Crassus cornered and defeated them in a final, decisive battle in 71 BCE. Spartacus himself fell fighting on the front lines. The Roman revenge was as terrible as their fear had been great. 6,000 captured survivors were crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies lining the road from Capua to Rome, a horrific monument to crushed rebellion and the brutal price of freedom. By 60 BCE, the machinery of the Roman Republic was grinding to a halt, choked by partisan gridlock and the personal ambitions of powerful men. The Senate, dominated by a conservative aristocratic faction known as the Optimates, consistently obstructed any measure that threatened their traditional authority. 3 men, each a giant in his own right, found their ambitions blocked by this intransigence. The first was Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, who had returned from a triumphant campaign in the East only to have the Senate refuse to ratify his treaties or grant land to his veteran soldiers. The second was Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome and the conqueror of Spartacus, who craved the military glory and political prestige that matched his wealth. The third was the charismatic and deeply indebted politician Gaius Julius Caesar, who needed a powerful consulship and a subsequent military command to build his fortune and political career. Separately, the Senate could block them. Together, they were unstoppable. In a clandestine meeting, these 3 rivals forged an informal political alliance that would be retrospectively known as the First Triumvirate. It was not a legal office, but a private pact, a gentleman's agreement to pool their wealth, influence, and legions to circumvent the Senate and achieve their personal goals. Their opponents called it the 3-headed monster. With the backing of Pompey's veterans and Crassus's vast fortune, Caesar was elected consul for 59 BCE. He ruthlessly pushed through legislation that fulfilled his partner's wishes. Pompey's eastern settlements were ratified, and his soldiers granted land, while Crassus's equestrian allies received lucrative tax breaks. In return for his service, Caesar secured for himself an extraordinary 5-year command as proconsul over Gaul. This alliance effectively subverted the Republic's political institutions. Decisions were no longer made in the Senate House, but in private meetings between these 3 men. It was a conspiracy of the powerful that demonstrated how hollow the Republic's authority had become, setting a dangerous precedent and paving the way for the civil war that would ultimately see Caesar cross the Rubicon and destroy the very system they had conspired to control. History is not merely a sequence of events, but a collection of moments. Singular points in time where a decision is made that alters the course of everything that follows. For the Roman Republic, that moment came in 49 BC, on the banks of a small, insignificant river in northern Italy called the Rubicon. On one side stood Gaius Julius Caesar, a brilliant general adored by his legions, fresh from his conquest of Gaul. On the other side stood the entire political establishment of Rome, embodied by his rival Pompey the Great, and a Senate that feared his ambition. They had issued an ultimatum: disband your army and return to Rome as a private citizen, or be declared an enemy of the state. For Caesar, this was no choice at all. To comply meant political ruin and likely prosecution by his enemies. To refuse meant civil war. The Rubicon was the legal boundary of his province. To cross it with his army was an act of insurrection, a declaration of war against his own country. Ancient historians tell us he hesitated, weighing the monumental consequences. He was not just deciding his own fate, but the fate of the Republic that had stood for nearly 500 years. Then, with the famous words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, he led the 13th Legion across the water. There was no turning back. This single act ignited a conflict that would consume the Roman world, leading to the death of the Republic and the birth of an empire. This decision, this crossing of a personal and political Rubicon, is a theme that echoes in the lives of all great leaders who face impossible choices. For Queen Jadwiga, her Rubicon was not a river, but an altar. Her choice was between her personal love for William of Habsburg and her sacred duty to Poland. Marrying Jogaila of Lithuania was her point of no return, a political and spiritual gamble that would unite two nations and change the religious map of Europe forever. Like Caesar, she stood at a precipice, and her decision would cast a die that would shape the destiny of millions for centuries to come. Power, once seized, is a precarious thing to hold. Julius Caesar, having vanquished his enemies in the Civil War, returned to Rome not as a general, but as its undisputed master. The Senate, depleted and subservient, showered him with honors, eventually naming him Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. He initiated sweeping reforms of the calendar and the government, settled his veterans on land, and planned grandiose military campaigns. In many ways, he was a benevolent and effective ruler. But in a city that had defined itself for centuries by its hatred of kings, his dominance was an open wound. His statues were adorned with crowns. He sat upon a golden chair in the Senate, and he treated the institutions of the Republic as his personal instruments. This accumulation of absolute power bred fear and resentment among the remaining aristocratic elite. They saw him not as a savior, but as a tyrant who had strangled Roman liberty. A conspiracy formed, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, men who believed they were acting as patriots. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, they cornered Caesar in a meeting hall adjacent to the theater of Pompey. The senators, his supposed colleagues, descended upon him with daggers hidden in their togas. He was stabbed 23 times, falling at the foot of a statue of his former rival, Pompey. His death, however, did not restore the Republic, as the conspirators had hoped. Instead, it plunged Rome into another, more brutal cycle of civil war. This violent end stands in stark contrast to the reign of Jadwiga. She too held immense power as a crowned monarch, but her authority was rooted not in military conquest, but in piety, diplomacy, and profound self-sacrifice. She navigated the treacherous currents of medieval politics, facing down the Teutonic Knights and negotiating complex treaties, not with an army at her back, but with faith as her shield and wisdom as her counsel. Her reign was a testament to a different kind of power, one that builds and unites rather than dominates. Her legacy was not assassination, but sainthood. The assassination of Julius Caesar created a power vacuum that nature and Roman ambition abhorred. Into this void stepped three men: Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, the young and cunning Octavian, his most trusted general, Mark Antony, and the Pontifex Maximus, Marcus Lepidus. They formed the Second Triumvirate, a formal dictatorship whose first act was to unleash a wave of bloody proscriptions against their political enemies, staining the streets of Rome with the blood of senators and knights. After hunting down and defeating Caesar's assassins at the Battle of Philippi, their alliance soon fractured under the weight of their own ambitions. Lepidus was sidelined, leaving the Roman world divided between Octavian in the west and Antony in the east, where he had famously allied with Cleopatra of Egypt. The final confrontation came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's victory was total. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they would ultimately take their own lives, leaving Octavian as the sole, undisputed master of the Roman world. But he had learned from his great-uncle's fate. Rather than declaring himself a dictator, he masterfully cloaked his absolute power in the language of the Republic. He took the title Princeps, or First Citizen, and the honorific Augustus. He claimed to have restored the Republic while systematically holding all the key powers himself. He ushered in an era of stability, reformed the army, professionalized the bureaucracy, and launched a massive building program, famously boasting he had found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. This forging of a new order from the ashes of conflict finds a powerful echo in the life of Jadwiga. Her union with Jogaila was not merely a marriage, it was the forging of a new political entity. From a state of perennial conflict between Poland and Lithuania, and under the constant threat of the Teutonic Order, they created a powerful dynastic union. Together, they navigated the complex process of Lithuania's Christianization, established a new bishopric, and laid the institutional foundations for the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a vast and influential power that would dominate Eastern Europe. Like Augustus, they brought order from chaos, forging an empire not through proscription, but through a sacred vow. What Augustus forged was more than just a new political system. It was the foundation for an unprecedented era of tranquility and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For roughly 2 centuries, from 27 BC to 180 AD, the Mediterranean world, under the umbrella of Roman imperial power, experienced a period of relative stability unheard of in human history. This was not a perfect peace. Rebellions flickered on the frontiers, and wars were fought to expand or secure the borders. But for the vast majority of the empire's inhabitants, it was a time of security. The rampant piracy that had plagued the seas was suppressed. A remarkable network of stone-paved roads stretching over 80,000 kilometers connected the provinces, facilitating trade, communication, and the movement of legions. A common currency and a unified legal system allowed commerce to flourish from Britain to Mesopotamia. Cities grew, adorned with aqueducts, forums, baths, and amphitheaters, symbols of a shared Roman culture. Ideas and religions, including early Christianity, spread along the very trade routes the empire had secured. The Pax Romana was the ultimate dividend of Augustus's brutal consolidation of power, a golden age of stability that left an indelible mark on Western civilization. Jadwiga''s legacy, too, can be measured by the long peace she helped to create. Her difficult choice to marry Jogaila did not just end a single conflict, it laid the groundwork for a new era in Eastern Europe. The Jagiellonian dynasty she co-founded would preside over the golden age of both Poland and Lithuania. This period saw the refounding and flourishing of the University of Krakow, which she personally endowed, turning it into a major center of European learning. It fostered an environment of relative religious tolerance and cultural synthesis, creating the unique multicultural character of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The union she cemented provided the strength to finally check the ambitions of the Teutonic Knights. Her personal sacrifice purchased a Pax Jagiellonica, a long-lasting peace and stability that allowed a civilization to blossom. The year 69 AD stands as a brutal, bloody testament to a fundamental shift in Roman power. Following the forced suicide of Nero, the last of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, Rome was plunged into a chaotic power vacuum. The illusion of a stable hereditary succession was shattered, replaced by the stark reality that an emperor could be made not just in the hallowed halls of the Senate, but in the dusty, violent camps of the legions. The first to seize the throne was Servius Sulpicius Galba, the governor of Hispania. His reign, however, was doomed from the start. Austere and elderly, he alienated the Praetorian Guard by refusing to pay the donative they had been promised for their support, and his harsh financial measures angered the populace. His fatal mistake was adopting a successor without consulting the military. The Praetorians, feeling slighted and bribed by the ambitious Marcus Salvius Otho, murdered Galba in the Roman Forum after a mere 7 months. Otho's reign was even shorter. While he enjoyed support in Rome, the powerful legions stationed on the Rhine had already declared their own commander, Aulus Vitellius, as emperor. The armies of the two rivals clashed in northern Italy at the First Battle of Bedriacum. Otho's forces were decisively defeated, and rather than prolong the civil war, he took his own life. Vitellius then marched on Rome, where his reign became synonymous with gluttony and excess. But as he feasted, a fourth and final contender was emerging from the east. Titus Flavius Vespasianus, a rugged and experienced general commanding the legions in Judea, was proclaimed emperor by his troops. His forces, led by capable commanders, marched on Italy. In a second, far bloodier battle at Bedriacum, the Vitellian forces were crushed. The Flavian army then entered Rome, dragging Vitellius from his hiding place and killing him. The Senate formally recognized Vespasian, who would go on to found the Flavian dynasty, restoring a desperately needed stability. The year of the 4 emperors was over, but its lesson was seared into the Roman consciousness. The true source of imperial power was not bloodline or senatorial decree, but the loyalty of the sword. From the ashes of civil war and the tyranny of Domitian, the Roman Empire entered what many historians consider its golden age, an era embodied by the emperor Marcus Ulpius Trajanus, or Trajan. Ascending to the throne in 98 AD, Trajan was the first emperor born outside of Italy, hailing from the province of Hispania Baetica. This provincial origin symbolized a new, more integrated empire. He was, above all, a soldier's emperor, a man who commanded respect through his military prowess and his willingness to share the hardships of his men. His reign is defined by expansion, pushing the boundaries of the empire to their greatest extent. His most famous campaigns were the Dacian Wars, a grueling conflict fought in modern-day Romania. The conquest of Dacia brought immense wealth into the Roman treasury, primarily from its rich gold mines. This victory was immortalized in stone on the spectacular Trajan's Column, which still stands in Rome today. Its spiraling frieze a detailed narrative of the campaign. This newfound wealth fueled one of the most ambitious building programs the capital had ever seen. He commissioned the magnificent Forum of Trajan, a sprawling complex of plazas, libraries, and basilicas that dwarfed all previous forums. Adjacent to it was Trajan's Market, a revolutionary multi-level structure often considered the world's first shopping mall. Beyond his military and architectural achievements, Trajan was a gifted administrator. The Senate bestowed upon him the title Optimus Princeps, the best of rulers. He implemented a social welfare program known as the Alimenta, which used low-interest loans to landowners to fund support for poor children, ensuring a future generation of citizens and soldiers. He governed with a sense of justice and cooperation with the Senate, a stark contrast to the paranoia of his predecessors. By the time of his death in 117 AD, while campaigning in the east against Parthia, Trajan had left an indelible mark. He had expanded Rome to its maximum territorial extent, enriched its coffers, beautified its capital, and governed with a wisdom that would be the benchmark for all emperors who followed. The period from 96 to 180 AD is often romanticized as the pinnacle of Roman peace and prosperity, largely due to the stable succession of 5 remarkable rulers known as the 5 Good Emperors. This era was defined not by bloodlines, but by a system of adoptive succession. Each emperor chose his heir based on merit and ability, a practice initiated by the first of their number, Nerva. After the assassination of the tyrannical Domitian, the elderly and childless Nerva was chosen as a safe, transitional figure. His most crucial act was adopting the popular General Trajan as his son and heir, establishing a precedent that would secure the empire's stability for nearly a century. We have already seen how Trajan, the great conqueror, expanded the empire to its zenith. His chosen successor, Hadrian, was a stark contrast. A cultured intellectual and a lover of Greek civilization, Hadrian recognized that the empire was overextended. He abandoned Trajan's easternmost conquests and focused on consolidation and defense. He traveled extensively throughout the provinces, overseeing the construction of fortifications, most famously Hadrian's Wall in Britain. He was a prolific builder, commissioning the Pantheon in its current form and his own grand mausoleum in Rome. Hadrian's chosen heir was the serene and pious Antoninus Pius. His 23-year reign was the most peaceful of the entire imperial period. He rarely left Italy, governing through capable legates and maintaining the empire's stability with a gentle hand, earning him the title Pius for his devotion and mildness. The last of the 5 was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. His reign, however, was far from peaceful. He spent most of it on the northern frontiers, fighting grueling wars against Germanic tribes like the Marcomanni and Quadi. The empire was also ravaged by the Antonine Plague, a devastating pandemic that killed millions. Despite these immense pressures, he governed with a profound sense of duty. his personal thoughts immortalized in his Stoic work, Meditations. Tragically, Marcus Aurelius broke the chain of adoption, allowing his biological son, Commodus, to succeed him, an act that would plunge the empire back into an age of instability and chaos, bringing the Golden Age to a definitive end. The stability of the 5 good emperors became a distant memory in the century that followed. From the assassination of Emperor Severus Alexander in 235 AD until the accession of Diocletian in 284 AD, the Roman Empire was torn apart by a period of near-total collapse known as the Crisis of the Third Century. This 50-year span saw the empire teeter on the brink of dissolution, battered by a perfect storm of civil war, foreign invasion, plague, and economic meltdown. The primary engine of the crisis was the military. The legions, long the source of imperial power, now became its greatest destabilizing force. Ambitious generals were proclaimed emperor by their troops, leading to a dizzying and violent succession of so-called barracks emperors. In just 49 years, at least 26 men laid claim to the throne, and nearly all met a violent end. This constant internal warfare drained the state's resources and stripped the frontiers of their garrisons, leaving them vulnerable. External enemies seized the opportunity. In the east, the aggressive Sasanian Empire replaced the Parthians and inflicted humiliating defeats on Rome, even capturing the Emperor Valerian in battle. Along the Rhine and Danube frontiers, confederations of Germanic tribes such as the Goths, Franks, and Alemanni launched devastating raids deep into Roman territory. The economic consequences were catastrophic. To pay the soldiers whose loyalty was essential for survival, emperors drastically debased the currency, mixing silver coins with base metals until they were virtually worthless. This triggered runaway hyperinflation, destroying savings and making trade based on coinage nearly impossible. The complex, interconnected economy of the empire fractured, reverting to a primitive system of barter and local self-sufficiency. In the chaos, the empire itself began to break apart. In the west, the Gallic Empire, comprising Gaul, Britain, and Hispania, broke away. In the east, the brilliant Queen Zenobia of Palmyra carved out her own independent Palmyrene Empire. It was not until the reign of the soldier Emperor Aurelian in the 270s that the tide began to turn. Through a series of brilliant military campaigns, he defeated the breakaway empires and earned the title Restitutor Orbis, Restorer of the World. The crisis was finally ended by Diocletian, whose radical reforms, including the Tetrarchy, would save the empire, but transform it into a very different, more autocratic state. The Roman Empire, by the late 3rd century, was an entity tearing itself apart. The period known as the Crisis of the 3rd Century had seen the colossal state stagger from one disaster to the next. For 50 years, emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed, often murdered by their own troops after only a few months in power. The economy was in ruins, ravaged by hyperinflation as rulers debased the currency to pay their armies. Plague swept through the population, and breakaway empires in Gaul and Palmyra challenged the central authority of Rome. The frontiers, once secure, were now porous, with Germanic tribes and the Sasanian Persians launching devastating raids deep into Roman territory. It seemed as though the end was near, that the great empire, which had dominated the known world for centuries, was finally succumbing to its own immense weight and internal decay. Into this vortex of chaos stepped a man of iron will and radical vision. Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletianus. Ascending to the throne in 284 AD, Diocletian, a soldier of humble origins, recognized that the empire was simply too vast and its problems too complex for one man to govern alone. His solution was not merely a new policy, but a revolutionary restructuring of power itself, the Tetrarchy, or Rule of Four. He divided the empire into an eastern and a western half, each ruled by a senior emperor, an Augustus. He, as the senior Augustus, took the east. His colleague Maximian became Augustus of the West. Each Augustus then adopted a junior emperor, a Caesar, who would be their designated successor. This system was designed to provide stable leadership, ensure a smooth succession, and allow for a more effective defense of the sprawling borders. Diocletian didn't stop there. He reformed the military, separating mobile field armies from frontier garrisons. He overhauled the provincial administration, creating smaller, more manageable districts. To combat economic collapse, he introduced a new system of taxation and famously issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, a bold but ultimately failed attempt to curb inflation by setting fixed prices for goods and services. Yet, this era of restoration had a dark side. Believing that traditional Roman piety was essential for the state's recovery, Diocletian initiated the Great Persecution, the most severe and systematic persecution of Christians in the empire's history. It was a brutal attempt to enforce religious unity, a final violent spasm of the old pagan order before a new faith would rise to redefine the very soul of Rome. Diocletian's meticulously crafted tetrarchy, designed to prevent civil war, ironically collapsed into one almost immediately after his abdication in 305 AD. The carefully planned succession devolved into a bloody struggle for supreme power among multiple claimants. Out of this crucible of conflict, one figure would emerge to change the course of Western history forever: Constantine. The son of a Caesar, Constantine was proclaimed Augustus by his troops in Britain in 306. Over the next 2 decades, he would methodically eliminate his rivals in a series of brilliant military campaigns. The most pivotal moment came in 312 AD, on the eve of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge outside Rome. According to tradition, Constantine looked to the sun and saw a cross of light above it, and with it the words, "In hoc signo vinces," "In this sign you will conquer." He ordered his soldiers to paint the Christian symbol, the Chi Rho, on their shields. His subsequent victory was total, and Constantine attributed it directly to the power of the Christian God. This was the turning point. In 313, alongside his eastern co-emperor Licinius, he issued the Edict of Milan, a landmark decree that ended the persecution of Christians and granted religious tolerance throughout the empire. It did not make Christianity the state religion, but it legitimized the faith and unleashed its potential to grow. Constantine's vision extended beyond religion. He recognized that the empire's heart was shifting eastward, towards the wealthier, more populous, and more strategically defensible provinces of the Orient. Old Rome, with its pagan traditions and troublesome Senate, was the past. He sought a new beginning, a Christian capital for a Christian empire. He chose the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, strategically located on the Bosphorus Strait, controlling the passage between Europe and Asia, the Black Sea, and the Mediterranean. In 330 AD, after a massive rebuilding campaign, he dedicated his new city, Constantinople. The new Rome was filled with churches, not pagan temples. It was protected by formidable walls and endowed with all the administrative structures of the original capital. This act fundamentally altered the empire's trajectory, creating a center of power that would outlast the western half by 1,000 years and become the glittering heart of the Byzantine Empire. The foundation of Constantinople and the Christianization of the empire under Constantine had created a new center of gravity, but it did not solve the West's fundamental problem: the immense and increasingly permeable frontier along the Rhine and Danube rivers. For centuries, Rome had dealt with the barbarian peoples beyond its borders through a combination of military force, diplomacy, and assimilation. Germanic tribes were often recruited into the Roman army as auxiliaries, or foederati, serving the empire in exchange for land and payment. This delicate balance, however, was about to be shattered by a terrifying new force storming out of the vast steppes of Central Asia. In the late 4th century, the Huns, a nomadic warrior people of legendary ferocity, swept into Eastern Europe. Their arrival triggered a massive domino effect, displacing the Germanic and Gothic tribes who lived north of the Danube. Fleeing the Hunnic terror, entire nations of people, the Goths in particular, pressed against the Roman frontier, not as raiders, but as refugees seeking sanctuary. In 376 AD, the Emperor Valens allowed a large group of Visigoths to cross the Danube into Roman territory. But mistreatment and corruption by local Roman officials soon turned the desperate refugees into a hostile army. This culminated in the catastrophic Battle of Adrianople in 378, where a Roman field army was annihilated and the Emperor Valens himself was killed. It was a psychological and military blow from which the Western Empire would never truly recover. The battle demonstrated that the barbarian armies were now capable of defeating the best of the Roman legions on open ground. The floodgates had opened. In the decades that followed, the Western Empire experienced a series of devastating incursions. In 406, a massive coalition of Vandals, Alans, and Suebi crossed the frozen Rhine River, pouring into Gaul and then Spain, carving out kingdoms for themselves on Roman soil. The most symbolic shock came in 410 AD, when the Visigothic king Alaric, after years of failed negotiations and broken promises with the imperial court, marched his army on Rome itself. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City was sacked. The physical damage was significant, but the psychological impact was immeasurable. The illusion of Roman invincibility was shattered forever. The sack of Rome in 410 was not the end, but it was the beginning of the end. The final decades of the Western Roman Empire were a story of steady, inexorable disintegration. The central government, now based in the easily defended city of Ravenna, had lost direct control over vast territories. Britain was abandoned, Gaul and Spain were dominated by Germanic kingdoms, and North Africa, the breadbasket of Rome, was conquered by the Vandals, who took to the sea as pirates, crippling Mediterranean trade. What remained of the empire was a hollowed-out shell, propped up by the military might of powerful barbarian generals who served as the true masters of the state. Figures like Stilicho, Aetius, and Ricimer held the title Magister Militum, or Master of Soldiers, and they controlled the throne, installing and deposing a series of weak, short-lived puppet emperors, many of them mere children. The Roman army itself was now almost entirely composed of barbarian mercenaries, loyal more to their paymaster generals than to the abstract idea of Rome. The final act was less a dramatic explosion and more a quiet fizzle. In 475 AD, the general Orestes deposed the emperor Julius Nepos and placed his own young son on the throne. In a twist of historical irony, the boy was named Romulus Augustus, combining the name of Rome's mythical founder with a diminutive of its first and greatest emperor. He would be its last. The following year, in 476 AD, the barbarian troops who formed the army of Italy, led by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer, demanded land. When Orestes refused, they mutinied, captured him, and executed him. Odoacer then marched on Ravenna and deposed the young Romulus Augustus. But Odoacer did not proclaim himself the new emperor. In a move of profound significance, he gathered the Western imperial insignia, the diadem, the scepter, and the purple robe, and sent them to the Eastern Emperor Zeno in Constantinople. The message was clear. The West no longer needed an emperor of its own. Odoacer would rule Italy as king, theoretically under the authority of the emperor in the East. With this simple, almost bureaucratic act, the line of Western Roman emperors came to an end. An institution that had shaped the world for half a millennium had quietly ceased to exist.